Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. Good start. Last session of the day, last guest speaker of the day, should I say, after you've been sat still all day, which historically we know is horrendous for your listening skills and attention span. So I will try and be as snappy and as quick as possible. But at the same time, I feel very passionate about what I've got to speak to you about today. And I've got quite a lot to say about it, so I'll try and balance those two accordingly. Let's see how we get on. Okay, so a little bit about me and why I'm qualified to speak to you today. I'm a neurological physiotherapist, and I did my time in the NHS from around the turn of the millennium until 2010 when I left, and I left to work for a inpatient rehabilitation unit in Chester, whereby I was their lead physiotherapist and I started their physio service up from inception. I promptly left in 2011 because I knew I could do a better job myself. So at that point, the Rehab Physio was born. That's not coming out quite right, is it? At that point, the Rehab Physio started, and it started from me as a one-man band, and it's grown from 2011 until present day, whereby now we're a team of specialist physiotherapists, and we work in a 3,500 square foot state-of-the-art physio clinic situated on the Wirral in Merseyside. And we treat a variety of different neurological conditions, and we specialise in robotics and technology, as Mark has just said. I run this service with my wife and co-director, Jennifer, who couldn't be with us today, but if anybody is married here will testify, particularly if you work with your wife, she is always somewhere listening. And she hears everything. So that said, I should say that she's a specialist physiotherapist, highly skilled in her own right, and she's tremendous at helping me run the service. Okay. Our vision and mission. Well, we aim to deliver the best affordable specialist neurological physiotherapy service using advanced technology and techniques to help our patients with complex neurological conditions and major traumatic injuries to achieve the best possible outcomes. Now, what does that mean for you today, and how does that sit with our theme? Well, I've always thought that the point of a personal injury claim is to deliver the best opportunity for somebody to have a life as close to the one they would have had should they not have had that injury occur to them. And what that might look like for a lot of our patients with physical difficulties relating to their injuries, to deliver that best possible outcome, the research suggests that you would require up to 7 hours a day of physiotherapy activity. Now, for those of you in the room that are used to dealing with funding requests, or indeed dealing with quantum physiotherapy reports, that figure might seem quite larger than that which you're used to seeing. And that is why I'm here today. I am here today to discuss why a change in mindset and practice and subsequently funding is required, why we are potentially underserving our clients by conforming to tired old routines and practices, and what best practice in neurological rehab looks like and what outcomes it can deliver. Okay, so to achieve that, what we're trying to do with our clients is trying to create neuroplasticity. And put quite simply, neuroplasticity is the way our brain and our nervous system generates new neural connections. It's the way we learn according to the demands and the experiences we place upon it. But not all experiences are created equal. And for neuroplasticity to best occur, those experiences need to be specific, repeated, and intense. So regards specific, well, if somebody has a functional goal, let's say they want to be able to hold their arm out to hold a steering wheel again to be able to drive, but they can't at the moment. Well, the physio would create specific exercises to target elbow extension, triceps control, the whole motor control, motor planning of the upper limb, shoulder stability, wrist stability, grip strength. They'd make that specific to their need. Repeated, well, I think it's probably common sense that the more we practice a task, the better we get at it. The more we repeat a task, the more those neural connections are made. Whether it's a golf swing, throwing darts, playing the piano, whatever it is, the more you do, the better you get at it. And lastly, intensity. So the task has to be intense enough for neuroplasticity to occur. We have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. There's been a study that shows the optimal conditions for neuroplasticity to occur happen at really high heart rates that we're used to seeing when we engage in a sporting activity or exercise at the gym. And I want you to think about how hard that would be to achieve if most of your day you're confined to a wheelchair or a bed. So what does the current situation look like for our patient population? Well, in this country, our governing bodies, the bodies that are in place to make recommendations for our statutory services, such as NICE or such as the Royal College of Physicians, they widely acknowledge that intensity, volume, repetition of practice delivers the best possible outcomes in neurorehabilitation. But they also largely acknowledge that they are not delivering that for our patient population in statutory services. Put quite simply, there are more people now than ever before living after a neurological injury. There's quite damning statistics for spinal cord injury that many people with a spinal cord injury never ever set foot in a spinal cord injury rehabilitation unit. And the Royal College of Physicians recently released a paper on acquired brain injury, and the quite damning quote at the bottom there stated that most patients receive treatment which is inadequate or inappropriate and delayed. So if you are lucky enough to be one of those ones who do get access to a specialist rehabilitation unit, what does it look like for you? Well, there was a study carried out in a stroke unit in Europe over a 14-day period, whereby all the patients were observed during their day. And it was discovered that 75% of the waking hours of the patients were spent idle. So 75% of their time not engaging in any meaningful physical activity. And when they did engage in physical activity in a therapy session, for instance, an upper limb session, it was observed that the patient would on average produce 32 repetitions of a movement. When you contrast that against the evidence where we should be trying to hit thousands of repetitions of movement to elicit positive change, it falls well short of that mark. Okay, so you come out of inpatient rehabilitation and you've probably not had ample opportunity to discover your rehabilitation potential. So what does your outpatient outlook look like? Well, typically, I can tell you, it usually looks like we'll see you once a week for 6 to 12 weeks, and at the end of that time period, we'll see how you're getting on. And that's probably if you've got private provision. If you're relying solely on statutory services, it's probably a lot less than that. And it simply isn't good enough. So, how much do you think you are worth? If you had the single most traumatic, life-changing injury that you will ever experience, and your world is turned upside down, do you value yourself to the tune of 1 therapy session per week, when the other 167 hours in that week you were not working to try and get yourself better? I'd like to think that most people in this room would value themselves a little bit higher than that. But this presents a problem for physiotherapy services, including my own. Because let's say blue sky thinking, let's say golden ticket, I get hold of somebody and say, I know what the evidence says, I'm going to treat you 7 hours a day, I'm going to get you as good as you can be, and I'm going to show you the best possible service. Well, then what happens to the queue of other people at the door who have the whole, the entire same need as this person that I'm treating that I can't get to because I'm treating one person? And where am I getting all those physiotherapy staff from? And if you do know, please let me know, because there's a national shortage at the moment. And that's where our robotics and our technology come in to help us deliver a more intensive service. It all boils down to opportunity, quite simply. So for example, if we have a show of hands, who here would eat more healthily, look after themselves a lot better, if, say, they had extra time in their week to source all their ingredients, plan all their recipes, cook all their food, pre-cook all their food, or maybe, let's say, have a live-in chef like a Premier League footballer? Who would eat better, look after themselves more? Yeah, quite. And who would potentially engage in more physical exercise if, say, they didn't work really long hours and they were exhausted when they got home, and even when they did get home, they had a family to look after. Show of hands? Yeah, quite. So it's all down to opportunity, and hopefully, in that instance, quite relatable opportunity. So how do we deliver that intensive program for our patients? Well, so we have an 80-hour intensive physiotherapy program, whereby people come for a period of 4, 5 or 7 weeks, depending on whether they can dedicate themselves to 3 days a week, 4 days a week, or 5 days a week. And that equates to 4 hours of intensive consecutive physiotherapy hours per day. I'm not a monster. They can go to the toilet, and they can also have, you know, dinner while they're there. But essentially, that is aiming to get as close to best practice as possible for our patients, and will deliver the best possible results. We still provide a more routine, regular physiotherapy service where people can come once or twice a week, because it's not suitable for everybody. There's a ton of variables that make people suitable or not suitable for an intensive rehabilitation program. And I can chat to people afterwards, but it would take me all day to go into at the moment. So I'm quite happy to talk to people afterwards. And we also run a specialist rehabilitation gym, and that acts as a drop-down service for our other 2 services. So quite often, traditionally, people would come to physiotherapy and then they would stop at some point. It can't carry on indefinitely for many, and therefore sometimes they would drop off a cliff, because with the best will in the world, when you're not going somewhere to dedicate yourself to your rehabilitation, you just don't do it as well in your own 4 walls. It also acts as a service to people who may well not have the opportunity to experience the best possible practice, who can't afford, they don't have the resources or the means. So if they can come to our facility and they can access an electrical stimulation bike, a standing frame, parallel bars, etc., but they don't have to pay for the expensive physiotherapist, and they can still try and put some sort of meaningful demand and work towards their goals at the cost of a monthly direct debit. Okay, so just to give me a break, and also just to break up the monotony in my voice for you guys, we've got a patient story coming up. So this is Steve. Steve had a thoracic spinal cord injury, incomplete, when he was picking up building materials from his garden. He didn't want his sons to be doing all the work, and he wanted to be quite proud still and lift up some heavy materials, and it didn't end well for him. He is very high up in the NHS, and as such is very staunchly protective of the NHS. And he was very, very guarded when his family insisted that he came to see us on his first day. Steve had left hospital, but he'd never, ever had the opportunity to explore rehabilitation, let alone entertain the idea of it. It sounds much better when there's a volume.
T6 and L3 and L4. To cut a long story short, there was some complications. I was in hospital for 6 months. As I was leaving hospital, the commentary was around, you've done really well for a T6 injury. You've done really well to get where you are now. And you may see some improvement in the future, but don't live your life waiting for it to happen. Was basically the parting. Went out for a pint with my friend, and he said, "Is this it? Are you giving up?" And I remember being quite sceptical, thinking it's the first time I've ever gone outside of the NHS for care. But from the assessment and from the chat, it became very clear very quickly that this was something that I would want to pursue. I suppose the first thing that influenced me when I came in through the doors was that it's a big, bright sort of environment. It looks as though and is that you have all the new equipment and the technology. Well, the biggest thing that sort of hit me was that people were more willing to be hopeful for you. But what I have had is clinicians willing to give you their clinical view around what possibly might be around the corner for you if you work hard. No one had really given me the opportunity to walk. And since I've been here, I'm on the intensive programme, and this is my 9th day. And yesterday, on my 8th day, I walked across the gym here several times, supported by a hoist, but that was there as a safety net as opposed to something that was actually holding me up, and it was a very, very significant moment for me. I think my wheelchair will feature in my life, but because of my stay here, I don't think I'm going to be relying on it as much.
I think I probably did 2 intensive programmes over that time, and I had a phased sort of exit that was agreed over a period of a few weeks, when we went down to 2 days and then 1 day, and it was a phased exit. So when I first came, I wasn't really weight bearing in any sort of meaningful way. I was still rolling about on the bed trying to pull my trousers up, and I didn't have any. I couldn't stand when I went to use the loo, etc. And then when I came here and had the assessment, I remember Jen saying to me, "If you come here and do this program, you will walk." And she said, "I don't know whether that's with a frame or with sticks or with crutches," but she said, "I feel very strongly that you will walk." And at first, it took me by surprise that she had the confidence to say, "You come here and do this, and it will get you to a situation where you're walking." I got upset, to be honest with you, and by the end of the session, I actually had a degree of confidence that the rehab physio would get me to a different place. I'm now able to walk for several hundred meters if I needed to. I'm on my crutches most of the time, and life's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I still daily have some frustrations about things that I can't do. But in the main, I'm in a position where I'm grateful, and I don't know. I suppose I feel that I'm doing more than I expected to do. When I came out of the hospital. During that time, while I was here, I took my driving test again, and I was classed as able to use just a normal automatic car without any alteration, and it's given me a significant degree of independence that I didn't have before. I think when I first came, I didn't have the strength in my legs. Even when I first started driving, I didn't really have the strength in my legs to fully support me, and I used to back up to the seat and then swing my legs over. But as it is now, I can lift one foot up, weight bear on one leg. That goes in, and I feel, and it's strong enough to hold my weight. So yeah, great. Life's changed significantly from when I first came. I needed assistance with an awful lot of things, and in the main, I'm very independent as it speaks now. I'm able to cook and clean and wash and do all the things that everybody else does. My wife's got quite high expectations, and doesn't let me get away with anything, which is great. No, I have a degree of independence that I'm able to go out and just live my life, really. Life's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I still have a significant degree of frustration around the things that I can't do, but I do reflect a lot on where I was and where I am now is completely different, and I've got a significant degree of independence as a result of coming to the Rehab Physio.
So Steve had never had the opportunity to explore any form of rehabilitation, such as walking, you know, functional goal of walking, and he was worth more than that. So just an introduction to some of the robotics that we use to try and drive that volume, repetition and intensity necessary for achieving those outcomes. I'm keen to say to everybody that the robotics are not a magic cure. They are just a means to drive that volume through to get the best outcomes. I was at an event last week for case managers, a Babacom event, and the case manager came up to me and said, "Oh, I've seen those centres with those robotics and those machines. What's the point if you know, surely they should just be practising function. If you're not going to be practising function, then it's all very well, but where's it going?" And I just stopped and said, well, absolutely, it's about function. You know, it's about them being assessed to see whether they're suitable for a programme such as this. It's not in my interest to get somebody in a programme such as this to go nowhere. It does nothing for my reputation. But you have to assess somebody, you have to find a reason, like why do they want to be here? What is the reason? What are they going to get out of it? And obviously you need to measure, you need to set goals, and you need to review afterwards and see if you're achieving those goals. But the functional thing really got me. So if I saw somebody who maybe could do this with their arm, and that's the only movement they've got in their arm, well, that's not functional. And as such, if they can only do that with their arm, do they use that arm on a daily basis? No. It lies dormant. They rely on their stronger side, or somebody else does things for them. If they say can't hold onto a door handle or turn a lid on a jar, then they won't. They just won't do it, and it won't get any better. And they certainly can't practice that function. But if they use robotics with the movement or virtual reality, whereby you put some sensors on their arm, and when they use that movement, they get a meaningful outcome in the virtual reality, and then they repeat that movement thousands of times across the next few hours, well then, hopefully they can get past a threshold whereby they can then start practicing the function. So it very much is with function in mind. And you see here just an example of the Lexo Gait Trainer. In some therapy sessions, you might not take a single step. One or two maybe maximum. In the Lexo Robotic Gait Trainer, you can take up to 4,000 in an hour. And I'm going to rattle through these because I'm conscious of time, but there's just evidence from 62 trials involving nearly 2,500 studies, so you don't just take my word for it, where robotic gait training has been shown to have a positive effect on gait speed, distance, basic activities, daily living. It works a lot better on people who can't walk, non-ambulatory patients. It has an effect on reducing dependency of people, and it's best used in the combination of conventional therapy and robotic therapy. So our intensive therapy is 1 hour of one-to-one physiotherapy, hands-on, and that physiotherapist then feeds into the technology room, whereby they would have a bespoke program on the robotics that would drive that volume and repetition specifically through to get them over the threshold to make those changes. And similarly, the upper limb robotics and technology that we have, you'll see that some of them make something possible that wouldn't otherwise. So say if you don't have that shoulder stability, you're not able to lift your arm, but you do have some functional movement to be explored, it can liberate you to do that. But you can also see on the right there, if you don't have the grip to hold on to something and you can't use it in function, but you do have sufficient grip, then that program can be tailored to just work with the amount of tone grip that you've got, and then you can have a positive outcome in the virtual reality, so you can build upon that. And similarly, there's evidence supporting the upper limb robotics, repetition, intensity. They are all national guidelines supporting this approach. I won't bore you with them all now, not least because it would completely saturate all of your time. But quite an interesting quote that's not up there from a more recent National Clinical Guidelines for Stroke in the UK from 2023. The direct quote is, "People with some upper limb movement or impaired mobility or balance should be offered repetitive task practice as the principal rehabilitation approach in preference to other therapy approaches, including bow bath." I don't know if you'd be familiar with the bow bath approach, but it's long been heralded amongst neurophysios and still is to this day blindly, despite a lack of evidence supporting it. There is evidence, there are national clinical guidelines supporting this, and we should be looking as to trying to achieve best practice as much as we could. An interesting quote from a seminar in America: if you have a stroke in the United States in 2014, you're better off if you're a rodent than if you're a human being. And the reason being is that rodents were observed to produce much higher repetitions of movement, 400 to 600 repetitions for upper extremity movements per hour, and 1,000 to 2,000 steps for gait training, whereas humans often could be in single figures for the same type of training. So, you know, how much do you think you are worth? I'm guessing it's more than a rodent. I hope it is. Okay, so just a quick summary then. Intensive rehabilitation enables patients to increase the volume of practice, to increase the quality of therapy, provide better treatment outcomes, and achieve more sustainable improvements. That's a summary of our intensive service. It is quite a lot for some people. It can completely take over your life. You have to dedicate yourself to it. So some people choose, even if they live locally, to move away and stay more local to our clinic, whereby they can dedicate themselves to their therapy, or indeed travel from around the country. An important part of our clinic also is group therapy and peer support. So both our rehab gym, which is in the picture there, and our technology room very much harnesses group therapy, and quite often the people who come to our intensive therapy program often stay friends because they really help, they share experiences and they help support each other in that onward journey. So just quickly, the conditions we treat, I mean, presentations can be varied. It all depends on your goal and what's important to you. Very recently, we've had somebody nearly a year to the day, they had an acquired brain injury and woke up in hospital completely paralysed, run the London Marathon in 3 hours, which I couldn't do without an acquired brain injury. He is unique. I can't do that for everybody. He was a world Ironman challenger pre-injury, and he's quite a remarkable person. We've had quite a high-profile case. He's in the press, and I'm quite happy to share his details with you afterwards because there's nothing that's not public knowledge already. Who was a very nearly complete paraplegic who also walked the London Marathon with crutches, and he, again, wasn't given a hope of achieving anywhere near that. But it could be as simple as somebody who's able to regain their independence, getting on off a toilet, maybe someone who can contribute more to getting dressed, undressed, washed, and feel less of a burden on their family and feel more useful for themselves. And then lastly, I just want to leave you with Wayne's story. Wayne won the golden ticket. Wayne had, well, he didn't originally. Wayne had a devastating cervical spinal cord injury, incomplete, but he won the golden ticket. He walked out of hospital. He rehabilitated, he did amazing things, and he was never going to walk perfectly, but he walked unaided without any crutches, Zimmer frame, anything, out of hospital, and everything was going so well that he was booked back in to have his bowel reattached as well. So suddenly he was going to have all his mobility back, he was going to have all his bowel functions back, and he was going to be able to live a normalish life again. But when he woke up from the abdominal surgery, his spasticity was through the roof to the point where he couldn't straighten his legs, he couldn't put his feet back on the floor. He was discharged from a general surgical ward with no specialist rehabilitation services, despite it being very much related to his spinal cord injury symptoms. And then the pandemic hit, where all services stopped. He had to source his own wheelchair, and that's how he came to find us.
So I suffered a motorbike accident in March 2017. Amongst other injuries, I had C1, C2 incomplete, and spent the next 6 months in acute rehab in the NHS and made a relatively good recovery. I actually walked out of acute rehabilitation in September 2017. Unfortunately, what happened in the next 12 months, I went for general surgery in August, September 2018 to have a course to be reversed, which has led to increased plasticity and tone, which has really affected my walking pattern and knocked me off my feet. Obviously, having made a good recovery from the initial accident, I was discharged from a lot of the outpatient services, which may gain NHS rehabilitation on, which has left me isolated and pretty much alone from a rehabilitation point of view. Being honest, I wasn't sure what to expect. I become pretty despondent with the whole situation. And the 1 hour a week private physio input I was gaining from Joe was merely maintaining my situation. It wasn't improving it in any way. So, by attending an intensive block, I realised that I potentially have nothing to lose and perhaps plenty to gain. So I thought, go for it. Obviously, I've had a lot of physio input from a lot of physios over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. But what set the rehab physio apart for me was both the staff, but also the integration of the technology within the treatment, which for me, obviously I hadn't seen anything like that before. It was a real game changer about how intense they could work you in each of his sessions. And I noticed the benefit of this from basically from session 1. I'm still feeling the benefit to the 18 months later. But both myself and my loved ones have noticed quite significant improvements over the 18 months I've been being treated here. This doesn't necessarily transfer to a firm walking pattern. But when I look back to those early sessions when I first came to the Rehab Physio, the assessment strikes me. I was unable to get my feet flat on the floor. I came to see Chris and the team with both airfoes and elastic foot-ups, and I still wasn't being able to get a flat foot. And to recently now, I'm mobilising my mouths quite fluently on clutches. And within my sessions, I've recently started taking a few unaided steps, which is an obviously massive improvement from where I was 18 months ago. And I hope to continue to make improvements, and I think there's more to come. To meet other patients with different levels of disabilities and injuries, and able to share both my experiences with them, and they're able to share their experiences with me. But not just us as patients, but also the environment Jill and Chris have created to be able to interact with the patient's families and loved ones and friends. It really has been a godsend for people like me, and I know, having spoken to other patients I now consider friends, they feel exactly the same as me, and I think it's something that's really positive, and both Jen, Chris, and the whole Rehab Physio should be praised for it. From what I've said to Tracy, the benefits to my mental health and the knock-on effect of confidence, social interaction, meeting like-minded people, meeting people that are in the same or a lot of times are in worse situations than myself. There's been a massive benefit for the last sort of 18 to 20 months. Ideally, I'd like the ultimate goal would be to regain that level of mobility that I had in September, October 2017. Whether that's possible, I do not know. But one thing's for sure, it won't be for a lack of effort and lack of trying. The amount of people that could obviously benefit the way I've benefited in the last 18 months. Nobody should be able to just be forgotten about, in my opinion. Everybody should have the ability to maximise their potential.
stood next to such a tall patient. I need to edit that one out of the next talk. Yeah, so how much do you think you are worth? I think we're worth a lot more, and that is what we should be offering our clients. Thank you.